Before we begin, here's how to earn continuing professional education credit for attending this session. Gain valuable insights by attending the podcast, then complete the assessment test to download your certificate. To do this, follow these simple steps. Click on the link in your description to access the session. Create a free account and attend the podcast. After the podcast, take the assessment test and download your certificate. It's easy, and it's free. We highly recommend checking out our subscription.
And you talked about processes, and that's exactly what I want to get into. Because I guess, it's the hiring process that needs to be relooked at, especially with the, incorporating Accountests, which is, which should be a crucial thing. So let's talk about that. What are the key red flags that a firm should be looking out for in the hiring process, and how can you improve that through Accountests?
I think the process itself. There's a few things that you need to get right. The first one is having a strategy and having a hiring strategy. So, what do you want your firm to look like? And hiring for gaps. So if somebody leaves or you've got the opportunity to hire a new person, is where do they fit? How do we move towards the ultimate goal of what we want the firm structure to look like?
Okay.
That's the overarching thing. I guess I think testing and assessment really is something that people need to think about before first interview, because that's when you can really speed up the whole process by doing the testing early in the process rather than trying to fit it in at the end, which is sort of what a lot of people look to do. I think interview training and technique is so important. How much training do accountants get at college to learn how to interview? Zero.
Welcome to We Are Trying to Figure Out with Saul, where we dive into the stories and strategies of industry leaders. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Giles Pearson, the founder of Accountests and a seasoned expert in assessing the technical competency of accountants. Giles has over 18 years of experience in accounting and consulting, and he's here to share his insights on modernizing hiring practices in the accounting industry. Welcome, Giles.
Hi, Saul. It's great to be here. And it's even more than 18 years. So 25 years in public accounting, 18 as a partner with PwC. So lots of experience in the industry, that's for sure.
Fantastic. That's really brilliant. So, Giles, let's start by hearing about your background. Can you give us a brief overview of your career journey and what led you to found Accountests?
Yeah. So I had a very traditional career journey, I guess. Going straight from college to Coopers and Lybrand, as it was then, in audit, and then moving into tax. Did some time overseas in the UK in the commercial world, went back to Coopers and Lybrand, which became PwC. So I became a partner with PwC on 1 July 1998, which was the day of the merger. So here in New Zealand, the two of us who came on that day, we were the first partners of PwC in the world of the new entity. So that was pretty exciting, just based on the time differences as there were. So 18 years as a partner in tax and private business. And this is not PwC in New York. So this is an office of 40 people, 4 partners, regional New Zealand. We were dealing mostly with privately owned businesses, a lot in the agri sector. So, meat, horticulture, forestry. This is a big agricultural area. Wine, there's a lot of wine growing. So that was my time in practice, I guess, was dealing with larger businesses, of course, because this is PwC and that's what we do. But in that sort of quasi-advisory space, some tax technical, and managing a team which got up to around 20 people by the time I finished with that. And you know, and I guess why did I leave? Well, I had always said that when my eldest child left school, I would quit, because it's like at that point your life is free and you can go and do other stuff, and I didn't want to be tied at that point. So you know, I followed through on that goal, and at 49 I finished with PwC. But you know, one of the experiences that I had while I was there was hiring people who, you know, didn't turn out as we'd expected. And we went out looking for skills tests to test people. And I teamed up with somebody locally, Steve Evans, who had a business doing testing and assessment, and said to Steve, please, can you find us some tests? Because this is frustrating, you know. And we had there was one particular experience, I guess, that just sort of sparked this, which was a woman who we hired who, you know, she was lovely, and her CV was good, and she interviewed really well, and we were, you know, I was just really pleased to have her come on the team. And it was a train wreck, and you know, her actual skills were so far away from our expectation, and it was very upsetting for her and for us. And of course, being accountants, we didn't deal with it particularly quickly. We tried to make the best of the situation, and it was, you know, look, it probably lasted 3 months before we pulled the plug on it. And you know, and it was a really poor experience for everybody, including her. And so that was probably the real spark. And so I went to Steve and said, find me some tests, and he went out and looked around the world and showed me some things that he found, and I looked at them and I went, this is just, I can't give this to a candidate. You know, it's, a lot of it was just sort of either basic bookkeeping or terminology that I didn't understand, terminology from the 80s, you know, stuff that was not even computerized necessarily, or not, you know, not assuming that people were even using computers. So that was, I guess, the genesis of an idea. And Steve and I sat down at one point and said, you know, hey, maybe we should try and build some tests. So when I finished at PwC, that's what we did. And we proved that out for a couple of years in New Zealand. Obviously, know a lot of people here. We were able to get people to trial things for us and help us build some test suites. A couple of years here, went to Australia, just sort of quietly moving along, getting it set up in Australia. Then we went to the UK, and then in 2022 we came to the US, and you know, that was a bit of a game changer, because the US is quite a challenging market. You know, a lot of businesses from this part of the world, Xero literally was founded from just, you know, in the same town as me, and have struggled in the US. And you know, the culture changed. So we spent a lot of time with that, and really it was only the middle of last year when we sort of pushed the real go button and said, hey, we really want to do this at pace. So and that's what we've been doing. So we've built out a pretty significant test suite for the US market, CAS, audit, tax on the skills side, and then personality, which I know you want to talk about. So we'll perhaps dig into that a little later. So yeah, that's the story, I guess, in a nutshell.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to definitely be talking about, you know, personality test, the psychometric test element that you incorporated into it. I'm so much excited to talk about it. It's one of my key areas that I love to talk about. But before we get to that, you know, let's dive into the challenges that you see the firms face when they're hiring accountants. You know, what is your experience? What has your experience been with how firms approach this process?
You know, and this is one of the challenges, especially for small and mid-sized firms, is, and look, you know, PwC in our environment was the equivalent of a small and mid-sized firm. And, you know, none of the partners or owners of these firms have any background generally in people management in general, let alone hiring. So they are probably naive in many ways, just, you know, don't understand the amount of effort that you really need to go to. You know, a lot of firms, as they get bigger, will employ somebody in HR or as a firm administrator, but often probably don't really give them enough tools and budget and the time and respect, if you like, to really work on that hiring piece. So it's often challenging for firms to run a good hiring process because it's not something that they do. Give them a set of financial statements to complete, and they've got checklists for Africa, and this is what we do. We know this. Hiring is really just the same. You need to have that same process, deliverables, timelines, but people don't do that. And I think one of the things that we constantly try and talk to firms about is really putting that effort in. And it's challenging because this is not what we got into accounting for. We got into accounting because we often love numbers and like advising businesses. That's sitting down with a business owner talking about their business. That's the stuff that really made me excited, still makes me excited. Dealing with teams and people not performing and all this stuff is, processes around people is often just not top of mind for firm owners. So I think, if they can get a good process, it's still maybe not going to be perfect, but it can be a lot better. And having a really formalized process and a bit of training, we can really improve the way the industry does that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you talked about processes, and that's exactly where I want to get into, because I guess, it's the hiring process that needs to be relooked at, especially with the, incorporating Accountests, which is, which should be a crucial thing. So let's talk about that. What are the key red flags that a firm should be looking out for in the hiring process, and how can you improve that through Accountests?
Well, I think the process itself. There's a few things that you need to get right. The first one is having a strategy and having a hiring strategy. So, what do you want your firm to look like? And hiring for gaps. So if somebody leaves or you've got the opportunity to hire a new person, is where do they fit? How do we move towards the ultimate goal of what we want the firm structure to look like?
Okay.
So that's the overarching thing. I guess I think testing and assessment really is something that people need to think about before first interview, because that's when you can really speed up the whole process by doing the testing early in the process rather than trying to fit it in at the end, which is sort of what a lot of people look to do. I think interview training and technique is so important. How much training do accountants get at college to learn how to interview? Zero. So yeah. But it is a real skill, and if you don't have it, get somebody who does have it to come and help you. But don't, if you want to use this competency-based interview process that we all talk about, you need to know how to do that. And just having the good questions to ask is not the full answer. So that's, I think, is a really key thing. Having a robust way to make decisions about candidates, so that and that covers off your legal responsibilities, but it actually really helps you make sure that you have a diverse firm, because we tend to hire people who we like and people who are like us, and yes, that's not going to give you the diversity of thought in your firm that you're really looking for. And so having a robust process to make decisions is actually a really good way of making sure that you get that. And you don't have to, if you've got a matrix or something, you don't have to hire the person who's number one on that matrix. But if you don't, you need to sit down with your colleagues and go, we need to work out what is our defense to the fact that we're not hiring the person who scored the best in our interview process, who scored the best in our testing. because that is the challenge that you need to give to yourself. So and I think the last thing I'd put on that list would be knowing how to close. So knowing how to close the deal with the candidate. And again, this is something accountants are not necessarily trained for, and it can be pretty tough because candidates have got multiple offers. They may counter offer you, they may stall you, and some of this is pretty simple, but it's just about having the right questions to ask and the right techniques to try and cut through that and get decisions made quickly, because all of this stuff, we use a phrase called hire fast with confidence, and it's that the fast bit of that is so important, because if you're the first person that candidate's got an offer in front of, you've got the best run at getting them on board. And if you run a quick process and can get that offer in front of them, and you've done it using a robust process, so you've got the best chance that they actually are going to work out for you when you take the model. At least you know how well they're going to work out. It might not be perfect, but you know what you're getting. That's that. So being able to close the deal at the end at speed. So those would be my probably key things that firms need to work on.
Do you want to earn CPE credit? Take this course of MyCPE 1 to earn free credit. Click the link in the description to get started.
Okay. Now, in your, when firms are hiring, like when a firm wants to hire an accountant, there are ways for them to test their accounting skills. They would probably have them do some entries into the accounting system or something like that. But there is a unique edge in your product. You're also involving psychometric testing into this. What led you to that, and how has that? Tell a little bit about the psychometric testing. Why is that important, and how should people look at it? Because I think a lot of people don't even know how to gauge those results and use it in their decision making.
Yeah, look, so skills are sort of easy, I guess, in that you test somebody's skills and you can put a score on that. And you can then line the candidates up and go, well, here's the scores, so that's sort of easy. The personality profiles are more nuanced, and you do need a bit more insight, if you like, to get the value from them. But I guess the reason we were particularly keen on thinking about personality, there are three sorts of pre-hire testing. So the skills, personality, and ability is the other one.
Okay.
So that's your numerical, verbal reasoning, critical reasoning, IQ test stuff, essentially.
Okay.
But when we looked at a study that was done actually out of the UK on what makes a successful modern accountant, if you like.
Yeah.
And they came up with 7 areas, and 4 of those were ones that were easily able to be assessed using a personality profile. So they talked about ethics, they talked about relationships, they talked about thinking, so applying your thoughts to new situations, and coping, which, to be honest, in the accounting profession is stress tolerance. So those were 4 of the 7, and so I guess we looked at that and went, it's actually really important that we can help firms look at those. And I guess we really started this in a hiring sense. So we built a personality profile around those 4 areas. It's a Big 5 profile, so these are the ones with good science, if you like. The results you get measure what you wanted to measure, if you like, as opposed to some of the other profiles which might have their place in a development setting, but they don't have the robust science for hiring. So a Myers-Briggs would be an obvious example that you wouldn't use that, and they tell you not to use that for hiring. You wouldn't use it. It doesn't have that scientific rigor for somebody who you don't know when you're trying to assess them from nothing. So
I was going to talk to you about that, because that's the thing, when people think about personality tests, they Bristol Myers with the Myers test is one. Then we got the DISC, which is another one. I mean, we got so many out there, but these are like the ones that stand out very easily. What about yours? I mean, which one is yours based on, or have you created this on your own? How is it?
Yeah, so look, and things like Disc, if you go onto Disc's website, they say do not use Disc for hiring. They actually send you to another product, which I think is another one of their things called PXT Select. So, again, their standard profiles are not suitable for hiring, and that doesn't mean they don't have their uses. It just means that you shouldn't use them for hiring. So what our psychology advisors put us onto, I guess, was there is a repository for all the questions that the big 5 profiles use. So they use essentially, similar questions. And when you these have been road tested like hundreds of thousands of times, millions of times per question. So you can go there and build your own profile for the things you particularly want to focus on. And so that's what we did. And it doesn't mean it's like wildly different from another big 5 profile. And predictive index, for example, is one that we hear a lot about that firms are using. And that's another big 5 profile. But our one, I guess, is focused specifically for accountants. And when we normed it, because they're all these tests have all these personality profiles, you're always measuring your candidate against something. So we normed ours against CPAs. So when you look at your candidate result, you see, how does my candidate compare to a norm group of accountants, as opposed to a norm group of the population, which is essentially what you get with another profile. So, look, again, that's not magic, but it just really means that everything you look at is focused on, how does my candidate compare? So, pick a trait like conscientiousness, which is clearly really, really important in accounting. If you're using a standard profile, you've got to go, well, we expect our accountants to be conscientious. How much more conscientious than the population do we expect them to be? For ours, you get to see how conscientious is my candidate compared to other accountants, on the expectation that they're already conscientious. So, that's the nuances, I guess. And then we build that out with interview questions, so that based on the profile, here's the interview questions you'd want to ask, and here's the personal development plan based on the profile. So you've never met this, or you don't know this person, but you can have something to get started with when they start to work for you.
Yep. It sets a very good framework, because you're not only evaluating how good is his skills, but you also know how is he as a person. Because that's what you're doing when you're hiring somebody. You're not just hiring a resource to fill in your business gaps, but you're also hiring a person. So, that's critical. And, there's this talk, there's a talk that's been going on for a long time now. There's a talent shortage in the accounting industry, and firms are struggling with with this challenge. And, I always believe that, your product is somewhere kind of like a solution to that problem as well. At least it helps the firms to hire better and hire quicker as well, if it's possible. But I wanted to ask you a little bit of because you've been exposed to hiring practices of so many organizations, and your product has been involved with so many firms, would you be able to let me know some innovative approaches that firms are taking to attract and retain the top talent amidst this shortage?
I think there's no magic bullet here. And again, it comes down to having a people strategy. And the firms that you see it doing really well are thinking that through, so in a hiring sense, say, they're thinking this through all the way from, what does their online presence look like? How focused is that? Not so much on getting and supporting their clients, but also supporting their existing team and having a good front face for potential team members. and then what are their using their existing team as part of their hiring strategy. So how do they look for talent using the people who are already working for them. So I think that sort of gets people in the door. And there's all sorts of other things. People are thinking about hiring people with second career people, or working more closely with colleges to try and get students, or even going into high schools and trying to get people through that sort of approach. I think that's sort of a step, if you like, further away. And for a lot of firms, especially small or medium firms, some of those things are a little bit more challenging, or they don't have the bandwidth to go to colleges and try and do that.
Yeah.
So I think but there's quite a bit of stuff you can do close to home.
Yeah.
And so that's like, what do we do to get some people to even apply for our jobs? That's we did a I was on a webinar yesterday, and we did a survey. We did like 300 people, and how many people did you applied? How many realistic candidates applied for your last position? And most people came back and said it was one or two.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't give you a lot to go on. So if you can expand that, that's great. And then once you've got them in the doorway, if you like, how do you move them through quickly? So that's probably the bit where we come in, is trying to help people quickly assess, quickly make offers, get people in the door. And again, the existing team have a really big part to play in that. And the firm culture, you're going to need to be able to demonstrate that. And I guess what we always say to people is, an interview used to be 55 minutes of me as the employer haranguing you, the candidate, to find out whether you're suitable, and then in the last 5 minutes, it's like, have you got any questions for us?
Yeah.
And we've probably all been to those sort of interviews. That's not going to cut it. You've got to give at least a third of the interview on persuading the candidate that you're the employer of choice for them. Here's what we're going to do for you. And that's where introducing them to team members, getting them to demonstrate that your team culture is going to be something that they're going to work with, and whether that's in person or online. So all of that stuff is, I think, is firms can get a lot. If you're talking about innovative solutions, it's not that innovative, but it's actually about having a, if you can move away from an old school approach, you're already in the top quartile.
Absolutely.
And that's going to get you a long way.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And very well put. Very well put. I love the way you structured it out and laid it out. I think it's very key insights there. And now, when all those people are coming into the door for the interview, I'm sure a lot of candidates would have some sort of a reaction when, they come to know that they're going to be tested, So, and I'm sure you must have come across this. So let's address those. If you could, what are the candidates' reactions to being asked to take tests as a part of the hiring process?
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now.
Yeah, look, there is a reluctance by some employers, and I know for a fact that recruiters don't like and will put off firms for who want to use testing. And I guess the cynic in me says that often that's because the recruiter doesn't want you to find out how good the candidate really is, because you may well just hire them anyway, and from their point of view, it's a transactional process and they get a fee when they but look, that's slightly cynical. I think for candidates, a personality test is about 20 minutes, and there's no wrong answers in personality. So I think that's a relatively easy sell to a candidate. And out of that, they're going to get something, assuming you've shared the report with them at some point, they're going to get some self-awareness. you're going to easily be able to sell to them the fact that it's going to help with an onboarding process for you. So personality is pretty easy. Skills is a little more tricky. But it's not. So what we've done, I guess, is put online a whole lot of stuff that people were doing otherwise with candidates. Nobody hired a candidate with no testing. It's just a question of what did they do. Did they ask questions at interview? You talked about, did they get them to process some information, or case studies were pretty common ones that we see, is that people will provide a P&L, a balance sheet, and say, what are the give me 5 takeaways from this, so those sorts of things. I guess it's a slightly different approach, but it's still the same issue. I think with trying to give the right story to the candidate is really about saying, hey, this is not going to be determinative as to whether we hire you or not, but we want to know where you're at, so that when you come to work for us, we start that journey in the right place with you. Clearly, if they do well in the test, that's going to be great. It might be that they're asking for a bit more money than you're prepared to really pay, but actually the testing you might go, hey, okay, and that might get them over the line for you because they clearly have got the technical knowledge. If they're struggling a bit with their technical, that might be, well, look, we still want to hire you, but look, this is what we're going to do. This is the training options that we've got for you. This is the mentoring that we can offer you. This is the sort of work that we can offer you. And we really want you to succeed. Maybe we're not quite giving you the money that you want, but because we're going to hit all of this stuff early, in 6 months we're going to do a review, and assuming you've moved to where your expectations are, and we're happy, we'll move your salary to where you want to be.
Absolutely.
So it's that sort of trying to turn it into a positive story. Hey, look, the reality is, and this is the flip side, if the person tests so badly that they're just not even in your ballpark, you can just say, actually, we don't, there is no value in us interviewing you. And as a firm, that's saved you $1,000, because trying to convene an interview with your technical people, your technical accounting team as well, and the prep time, the interview time, and the debrief time, for somebody who, to be honest, you probably would work out within 5 or 10 minutes maybe that you wouldn't want to hire them anyway. You've just saved all of that. So there's savings that come with that as well.
Absolutely. And the very interesting point that you pointed out, that letting the candidates know that this is not like a factor that we are using to make a decision on hiring you, but we would like to know the type of person that you are, so we can create that environment, we can get started in the right spirit. But then there's this curiosity that I wanted to check with you. Like, are there any legal issues that firms need to understand when they are implementing such testing procedures?
So look, I think this is this goes across all the testing that firms do. So the key one is EEOC, so the Equal Opportunities legislation. And what that says is you need to use a test. If you're doing testing, you need to use tests that are appropriate for the role. You need to use tests that have been validated, and you need to train your people on the use of those tests, and you need to use them consistently. So you can't test some people who apply for a role and not test other people. So that's that's reasonably obvious. There's there's also privacy issues that, for example, we have to deal with. So all our tests are proctored, which means that when the candidates do the test, the camera is on, where it doesn't actually record them doing the test, but what it does do, if they are doing something other than what I'm doing now, which is looking straight at the screen, it will take a snapshot of what they are doing, and also if they tab away, it will take a record of when they when they left the test.
Yeah.
So clearly there's some privacy issues to do with that. And, we're compliant with GDPR, which is the highest sort of standard, if you like, the European standard. But any firms that are doing, that are, using that sort of data need to make sure that they have complied with the privacy.
Absolutely,
laws.
absolutely. And you very rightly pointed out training at the hiring side. The training needs to be essential. And that's the key of this entire testing environment. When we're incorporating it, we know why we are doing it, but how we are interpreting those results in our hiring process, that needs to be very critical. All right, we have reached the 30-minute mark. So do you want to take a bio break?
I'm good.
No?
Yeah.
Okay, I think you're good. All right, great. All right, now.
Water.
All right, yeah, you can do that. Hey, it's my job to let you know that we're all right. Let's get going then. All right. So that's really interesting. Now I would like to shift this towards a talk that has been happening so often. I see a lot of people now using AI in their hiring. So in your own words, how likely is AI to impact the hiring process in accounting firms, and what are some ways AI can help streamline and improve the hiring practice?
I think firms need to be careful about some of the AI that is out there. And when I think about AI and hiring, I think about the fact that this is a people process, and firms need to be really careful that what is the candidate experience, because especially in a market where you're struggling to get candidates often, putting them and my kids have had this experience, and you see quite a bit of it if you dig around in Reddit and things like that.
Yeah.
Experience of being asked to do a virtual interview. So being asked to here's some questions, and then you have to have your camera on and you respond to the questions, and then they get interpreted by AI to go back to the employer to as part of their screening process, if you like. Yep. That's a really poor experience for candidates. And yes, that might work if you are Meta or Google or something, because you're inundated with opportunities. But for accounting firms, I really steer away, to be honest, from using that sort of technology. So but look, AI has clear uses, and people are using it at the moment with that sort of basic stuff around email composition and all this sort of, and that's all really, really good, and will improve the way we work. We're working on AI in the background for test interpretation. So at the moment we use some dynamic text in our particularly in the personality profiles, but once we've trained our AI model to be able to give bespoke feedback, then it's going to be as good as having a personalized response to every report that you get. And I think that's valuable. We need to be careful, of course, that AI is correctly representing what it sees, and again in skills that's pretty easy, in personality it's more challenging. But I think firms just in general need to think about the fact that this is a people business. So if you're doing screening, in my mind that needs to be in person, and all the interactions with the candidate should be as personalized as possible, whilst using the technology. And there's a lot of HRIS systems out there already which are have great technology for tracking candidates and making sure that you deal with the process, if you like, of getting that hiring strategy right.
All right. And I looked at your product, and I noticed that you have mentioned that there are tests for all levels, from graduates and bookkeepers. But would you mind just giving a snapshot of all those levels? What are those all levels that are covered by your product, which can be helpful for accounting folks?
So I guess in the what we've thought about in the US market is the three main work streams, if you like. So CAS, audit, and tax. CAS has been the area that we've found the most interest in, and in that, bookkeepers is the area that firms, I think, struggle with the most, because anyone can call themselves a bookkeeper, but you're trying to hire somebody who's maybe at that sort of full charge bookkeeper level. This person who says they've done all this stuff is like, how do you know? And there's some real horror stories of people who clearly don't have the skills. So in CAS, we go through that bookkeeper, non-profit bookkeeper, and then through to virtual controller, virtual CFO level, and then that sort of we've then got tests that cross across from CAS through to tax. So tests that cover some accounting and some tax areas for those firms where you've got that sort of significant interchange between the two, and then some basic, not basic, some specific tax tests. So tax associate, senior tax associate, covering individual and business taxes, and then up to tax manager as well. And then in audit, covering seniors through to managers. So people tend in audit not to move in those first 3 years. So we sort of start our testing at that level. So all of that, I guess, is all about testing experience, and that's where my time in practice, I guess, came to the fore when we were starting all of this, is that what we're wanting to test is the practical knowledge of people. So yes, they're all multi-choice type questions, but they're based on real life scenarios that people have to deal with when they're in practice. This is not the CPA exam with some textbook theoretical question.
Gotcha. So that's interesting, and the interest. Another thing I found that like your tests are not just US specific. They can be for other countries as well. You've got for UK, you've got Australia, New Zealand, everything. But when you're doing the test for individuals who have got the knowledge in tax, I think tax also requires it to be updated because the tax changes every year. So
yes,
how do you keep a track of that?
So we built our tax tests using an expert group, because I'm clearly not an expert in US tax. I know a bit more than I did before, but so we used an expert group of tax CPAs to help us develop the question set and then grade those questions through those sort of associate, senior associate, manager level. So we're able to then go back to that expert group, and we do that every year and go back to them and go, hey, can you work through all of this again and just tell us what's changed and what hasn't changed? And these are people who are running their own firms, so they know what's happening. But we tend to run the tests because people are working in, if you like, in a tax season. So at the moment, the tests are all based on 2023 tax returns. So it's based on what people are preparing, if you like, for taxes, rather than thinking about what are the advisory opportunities going forward. We've focused on that tax return preparation area, and that could be something we think about in the future. But it's a different skill set, and to be honest, people tend to be struggling with hiring people at those associate, senior associate levels, and to be honest, most of the work they're doing is that, if you like, backwards looking compilation work, as opposed to advising clients on tax strategies, if you like, which tends to be a little further up the tree.
Absolutely. And there is a hiring side wherein you're hiring somebody for the first time, and then there is also I won't really call it hiring, but you have an employee who's already working with you, and now that person wants to move into a different. Or do you think that you can upgrade him to something else? Like, you have been a bookkeeper for a long time, you've been doing payroll, and now you want to move him into tax preparation or something. So do your tests also take those kind of scenarios into consideration and help the firms?
The skills ones, we are thinking about that in terms of a development opportunity. The challenge, and firms talk to us about this all the time, and we have worked with a couple of firms using our tests, but it's that the challenge for the firms is really about identifying training needs. And of course the tests we built are trying to assess the skills of somebody who you've never met, across a broad range of areas, so that you get a whole lot of data points, across a range of experience. Whereas when you're trying to assess a training need, you tend to want to dig in a bit more and understand, for example, what's my bookkeeper's understanding about cash versus accrual accounting, and what are the, do they get that? When we might ask a couple of questions about that in our test. You need to ask probably 15 or 20 questions to get an idea as to whether somebody's needs further training or they don't. And so we are working on that. It's quite a different market. We're actually working with some of the training providers on that, because it's interesting. A lot of the training providers provide really great training, but very few of them have any way of assessing where to start. So you end up either training people who already know the stuff, and it's sort of, you could be spending that time and money on something where you're adding value to that person, or you're trying to train them on something that's actually already beyond where they start, and you're wasting your money, because they're just not going to absorb what you're trying to put to them. So that's the bit that we're interested in. Personality, of course, is quite different, and we've worked quite a lot with firms on testing their whole team, for example, so they can think about how they work together, what's their diversity of thought, self-awareness for the individuals about how they make decisions and how they should interact with their colleagues. But even better, when they're coming to hire the next person, they can put them through that same test and then see where they fit, and that will give them some good insights as to where that person's going to best work in the firm. And again, if you're trying to think about that diversity of thought piece, where do they fit into our matrix of our existing team? Are they adding to that, or are they just going to be like all the people that we've already got? Again, you walk into that with your eyes open rather than finding out afterwards.
Absolutely. In fact, I used to work for a company in the past who had made it mandatory for every employee to go through a personality test every 6 months, and the managers
6 months.
Okay.
And
then the managers were also equipped to understand those test results. I mean, there was a separate level training for the managers, because the managers need to know how to interpret it, well as not also violating any laws or discriminating or creating those kind of situations, but using it to make it better for the resource to continue to work. And also, it was mandated, if you're going to be getting promoted to a certain position, like you've been with the company for a while and now the company feels that I think it's time that we move you into a role where you're going to be managing people or whatever. But before that, you need to also have that test done, so the company is also able to gauge how can this be put forward. So I mean, I think this personality test, this element is very critical. The skills, the personality, and I think there were 3 things that you told me. There was skills, personality. There was one more thing.
Ability.
Yes, ability. Yes. So those are the 3 things that I think they perfectly fit in. So as we are coming towards the end, as we are wrapping it up, I would really like to know, what are your final thoughts on the future of the hiring practices in the accounting industry?
I think accounting is still a cool profession. It's changed a lot. But it's still a real people business.
Okay.
And people get into it for the buzz that you get as a advising business owners and helping them. So I think in terms of, that whole pipeline and trying to get people into the profession, I think we need to get that message out there that it's actually fun, and all this technology is just making life easier for the people who are working in the industry. So I think if your question's about what is the, what's the profession's hiring, what's the word, pipeline.
Yes.
People talk about the pipeline, but that's, I think we should all be positive about that. We just need to make the profession, make people understand how great a profession it is, and we've got challenges in the educational requirements and in the pay, and I think we need to work on all of that. But fundamentally, it's still a great place for people to work, and it will still be here in another 20 or 30 years.
Absolutely. I believe that accountants are the one who give meaning to the numbers.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I am totally delighted, and thank you so much for such an engaging and insightful discussion. It's been a delight to have you on our podcast. And to our listeners, stay tuned for more episodes. We're trying to figure out with Saul. And don't forget, keep innovating in everything that you do. Until we talk next, take care and have a blessed day. Cheers.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now.